I'm actually going to start at the end. This isn't really the end, but it's the end point that I want to pick rather than the very beginning. The end point I want to pick is a very famous controversy that happened in the 4th Christian century, so about 300 years after Jesus, the so-called Arian Controversy. The Arian Controversy rose to popular knowledge some years ago when Dan Brown wrote the Da Vinci Code. In the Da Vinci Code, we learn that at the famous Council of Nicaea in the year 325 is when Christians decided that Jesus would be the Son of God. And they took a vote, and it ended up being a close vote. But Jesus ended up winning out, and he became the Son of God. That is in the Da Vinci Code. So I tell my students at Chapel Hill when I'm teaching that if they want to learn about the history of the Middle Ages, the way to do that is not to watch Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And if they want to learn about the history of early Christianity, the way to do that is not by reading Dan Brown. Let me tell you what really happened at the Council of Nicaea with regard to the Arian controversy. There was a influential Christian leader in Alexandria, Egypt, named Arius. Arius developed his theological views in ways that he thought were perfectly orthodox, perfectly true and correct and biblical. His view about Christ was that Christ was God. Christ was a divine being. He was the Son of God and he was God. But how could Christ be God if God was God and there not be two gods? And how can God the Father be almighty and Christ be almighty? If they're both almighty, then neither of them is almighty. Only one being can be almighty. And so Arius maintained that in eternity past, God the Father alone existed, but he wasn't the Father yet. God begot a Son. God, in effect, brought Christ into being as a second-level divinity, a secondary divinity. He wasn't equal to God. Nobody can be equal with God the Father. He was a secondary-level divinity. There was a time before which Christ did not exist. In other words, Christ came into being at a certain point in time as a secondary divinity, lower than God the Father. Christ then, through the power of the Father, created the universe. And Christ became a human being to die on the cross. That was Arius' view. This view was a popular view throughout much of Christendom. The basic view had been around for a long time, although Arius formulated it in particularly persuasive ways. And after Arius' day, people continued to hold this view. His bishop in Alexandria was a man named Alexander. Alexander took exception to Arius' view. In Alexander's view, there never was a time when Christ did not exist. Christ had always existed. He wasn't begotten by God at some point in time. He had always been begotten by God. And he wasn't a secondary divinity. He was equal with God the Father. God the Father and God the Son are completely equal in every way, and they always have been forever and ever.